Thank you. Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting being held on February 15th at City Hall. We welcome all the guests that we have. We're excited for the evening and what we have. We have a couple of, it's always fun to have the nice presentations and we're looking forward to those. We have those first of the meeting. We want to begin by making sure that we can hold our City Council by doing a roll call vote starting at the end.
Meekum present.
Hurst present.
Kewen present.
Yentz present.
Thank you. So we have 4 or 5 present, so we will move forward. Let's start with the prayer or thought by Councilman George McEwen.
So in giving these thoughts, one of the things I was thinking about was where we sit as a nation, and we hear a lot of prayers that are going on for our nation and for civil dialogue and things like that. And I thought, well, just cast my mind back and what comes to mind. And immediately the word Teapot Dome scandal came to mind because that's about 100 years ago. So I went back and got on the archives for the newspapers and looked at what was going on with that scandal, and there was a lot of threats to democracy, and the same sort of rhetoric you hear today was then. And I said, well, what was Centerville doing in 1924 through like 1926? And it was a fun little read to go through and see where we were as a community. I was just telling the council beforehand, and when they did their financial statement for 1923, they had $26,000 in assets and $321 of expenses per year as a city. They were organizing the first chapter of the Poultry Commission, and they were getting ready to host the Davis County Fair's poultry exhibition. They were doing shows and plays. The Mikado was coming through. But what was interesting is when I took those same sort of articles and I brought them forward, we're doing the same things as a community. We're still putting on plays. We're still gathering as a community, and that gives me a lot of hope and heart that it doesn't matter what's happening at the larger level. If you still have that commitment to your community, it all works out. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. And we're still doing it at $21,000 a year. Pretty good, huh? Just kidding. So that's a great thought, and I love the history. Thank you so much. If you'd all rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now's the time for the open session. This is where any one that's joining us could come to the microphone, state where you're from, and just kind of keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. So we do have a couple of public hearings tonight, and so you don't need to come up on those as far as the zone map amendment on 1756 North Main, and also on 295 East 300 North, and a food truck, which you would have a chance at a public hearing. But anything outside of that, the open session is now open. See nobody needing to talk in the open session tonight. Let's move to some of these exciting events on our agenda tonight that I talk about. The first item is the Davis County Officer of the Year Award that's being given to Officer Casey Scott. And as I read the Chief's comments in our packet, I was really impressed and inspired, but I don't want to bungle it up. So Chief, I want you to get up here and talk about Officer Scott and this award.
I'll invite the presidency from the Davis County Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 6, to start it out.
Hello, I am Lexi Benson. I am the Vice President for the Davis County Fraternal Order of Police. And each year we reach out to all the chiefs in Davis County and ask them to nominate someone in their department for Officer of the Year. We received several nominations, and we received one that, in particular, that stood out to us, which was from Chief Paul Child, and we selected Officer Casey Scott. And I'd like to ask Chief Paul Child to come up and read that nomination to you guys.
Thank you, Lexi, and thank you to the FOP. It's a great organization. I'm a member of it, and I appreciate it. I want you to know that in Davis County, there's 327 officers that are members of the Davis County Fraternal Order of Police. It's well represented, so I think that it also makes this award even more prestigious. So thank you, Council and Mayor, for taking this time to help us recognize Officer Scott. So I'll just go ahead and read through my nomination here. I would like to nominate Officer Casey Scott of the Centerville Police Department for your prestigious award of Officer of the Year. On August 28, 2021, Officer Scott was assisting another officer to investigate a hit-and-run/DUI-related incident in Centerville. The driver of the car was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol, and the car received damage from hitting several street signs. This included flattening of at least 2 of the vehicle's tires. The arrest took place at the driver's home, where the person being arrested had young children and his wife, which were present. Officer Scott learned that the damaged car was the family's only transportation, and they did not have money to repair the tires. He watched as these young children cried and assisted with the arrest. Officer Scott examined all 4 tires on this car and could see that they were in very poor condition. He realized that all 4 would need to be replaced. For days after this arrest, Officer Scott could not get this family off his mind, so he decided to do something about it. Officer Scott contacted the family to obtain more information, and then he decided to purchase new tires for the family car. Officer Scott went to the Walmart in Centerville, where he purchased 4 new tires for this car with his personal credit card, and then took the family the receipt with instructions to take the receipt to Walmart and have the tires replaced. After learning of this situation, I contacted the Davis County Colonels Association to see if they would be willing to reimburse Officer Scott the $402 he spent on these tires. They agreed to do so. I note that Officer Scott was obviously willing to purchase these tires with his own money without reimbursement, and he said so several times to me. I insisted that he should be reimbursed, and he accepted. I am informed by Officer Scott's sergeants that this type of compassionate service is common for Officer Scott, who often does little things to help people out without fanfare or expectation of recognition. He genuinely cares about people and proactively does what he can to improve quality of life for people he engages with. Officer Casey Scott is just as financially stressed as about any other officer out there who is raising a family and paying a mortgage, but was perfectly willing to sacrifice for the family of a man he helped arrest for DUI. Despite his impressive and proactive enforcement history, when I checked his personnel file, there was not a single citizen complaint. I did find several letters of appreciation from both citizens he has interacted with and his supervisors. Officer Scott has worked for Centerville Police since June of 2017. He is currently a Police Officer 3, oversees our Deer Control Unit. He's on our Bicycle Patrol Unit, a firearms instructor, and serves on the county-wide Public Order Unit. And I might add, he's also currently our DARE officer and SRO. Officer Scott displays the character and conduct that every police officer can be proud of. He is a prime example of compassionate enforcement and guardian of community. Sincerely, Chief Paul Child. So I'd like to invite Officer Casey Scott and his family. He has his wife, Randy, here with their children and his parents. And we'd like to, I'll turn the time over to the FOP presidency to make that award.
Yeah, we would just like to present you with this award. We did this at our Christmas banquet, but we wanted to present the award to him here at City Council. Congratulations.
Appreciate it.
And then can we have you guys stand for a picture real quick?
Of course.
I think we need a little applause.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. If those of you that don't know Officer Scott those of you that don't know him, get to know him, because he is not only what the chief said there, but he is a fine person as well as a fine officer, and he's always a lot enjoyable to talk to and be with. He is one of our great officers, so thank you, Officer Scott. So.
He is amazing, and he does look after his crossing guards. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, let's go to item number 2, which is also another fun thing. We have the president of Weber State University here, as well as one of his students who is a resident of Centerville, and we'll let you take it away, President Mortensen, with your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Wilkinson. Good evening to all of you. My name is Brad Mortensen. As the mayor said, I'm president at Weber State, but maybe more importantly, I'm a former resident of Centerville. Don't hold that against me. For almost 12 years. Lived here. The last time I think I was in this room, we were hot over a maverick 11-year-old baseball draft for some of our city teams here, but family has great memories of living in Centerville and still try to come back every 4th of July to the best parade and freedom celebration around. So, but I'm here tonight to talk to you. I worked at Weber State when we lived here. I gained a few more responsibilities, necessitated us moving closer to campus, moved to Ogden, and 3 years ago I was named president at Weber State. And when I was named president, the Board of Trustees there asked me to do more to engage with our communities, our surrounding communities. I had talked about needing to be louder and prouder about the great things happening at Weber State, and they said, okay, we're going to hold you to that, Brad, is in this new job. And one of the things we're doing is every year we have a group of students who are Presidential Leadership Fellows, who are outstanding students who are nominated by faculty and staff, not just for their outstanding academics, but for the great work that they do being engaged on campus and in the community. And as we, one of the things we do is we highlight those students is go to their city where they live and allow them the opportunity to share a little bit about their journey and what they're experiencing at Weber State with you. And so in a minute, I'll introduce actually the president of our Presidential Leadership Fellows to you, who's a resident of Centerville. But if I can share a couple other things about what's happening at Weber State first. We have 29,774 students enrolled at the university this year, and 429 of them are residents of Centerville. So both in concurrent enrollment programs and our degree-seeking students. So there's great representation here from students in Centerville taking advantage of the educational opportunities at Weber State. We also have 1,505 alumni living in Centerville, some of whom play very prominent roles in your city management and leadership. Your city manager, Brant, is a Weber State alumnus who doesn't seem like it was that long ago when you were a student, and has done a lot of great things in his career, and great to see him leading here. Chief Child is a alumnus of Weber State's criminal justice program, and there are many others as well. One thing that we accomplished this past year is setting a new strategic plan for the university, and the thing that I like to focus on that plan is a new vision statement where we say we will be a leader in meeting students where they are, and guiding and challenging them to achieve their goals academically and in life. And one of those great students who I'm really proud to introduce to you is Stephanie Ammett, and I'll allow Stephanie a few minutes to share her story with you.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Ammett. Thank you for allowing us to speak with you guys today. I'll just start by saying that 2 of the best decisions I've made was moving to Centerville and enrolling at Weber State. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have dreamed that I was living the life that I'm living now. I was homeless and previously aged out of foster care at the age of 18 a long time ago. But I did so without support, so I went through a whole bunch of interesting obstacles in life, and I never thought that I would ever make it back to college. I enrolled at Weber State initially because of the diversity of their student body, but that quickly became a family to me. I found a place where I belong finally, attending Weber State. I don't know, I feel like I fit in finally, which is rare. Also here in Centerville, though, I've gone through a lot of things since enrolling in college. I've lost several family members, and if it wasn't for the support of the faculty and staff and students at Weber State, as well as the residents here in Centerville and my amazing neighbors, I probably wouldn't have gone back to school after the pandemic started. But yeah, I study social work. I'm a junior now. I'm the president of Presidential Leadership Fellows, member of the National Society of Collegiate Scholars and the National Society of Press. So going from having been homeless for 5 years with my daughter in the streets to where I'm at now, and also doing an internship and writing a bill that passed and is part of Utah Code now, I never believed would happen. But it's through the support of Weber State and Centerville City, so that's who I am, and I appreciate you guys having us here tonight.
Thanks, Daphne, so much.
I could go on for a long time talking about things that are happening at Weber State, but please know that we want to be here to support you and your community, produce a lot more graduates like Brant and Chief Child and Stephanie, and that just become the backbone of a strong, vibrant community in every way here, whether that's in teaching or healthcare or city government, social work, or entrepreneurship and business. We want to be your partner, and please know you can reach out anytime. I'm not that far away, and know and love your city well. So happy to respond to any questions or comments from members of the council, or certainly allow you to get on with the rest of your good work this evening. So thank you for the time.
Well, I was hoping you'd put in a plug for your upcoming storytelling festival.
Oh.
It's a fantastic event.
So the Storytelling Festival is truly awesome, and it's one of the only storytelling festivals in the country that combines youth storytellers with kind of the professional, veteran, well-known storytellers as well, and try to get out to involve all the elementary schools and junior highs in Weber and Davis County and Morgan County too. And that's coming up the end of this month, the 27th, 28th, and then the 1st of March, I think. But yeah, that's a great community event. Thank you very much, council member, for that plug.
I will echo what Stephanie said. The faculty is incredible at Weber State. I really do appreciate Brad when I interned for Weber State. He's a fellow MPA from Syracuse, and he really helped me recognize some of the importance of the role of government, so I really appreciate Brad. But there is a teaching university. You're not just one student with, or 300 students with maybe an assistant or a student, right? It's a teaching university, and I think it was an incredible experience, so I appreciate Weber State.
Now we want your report card.
Yeah.
You can have my report card. Still look at economics. I had to retake that one.
I want to say something too. Weber offers a great opportunity for any age of student. Stephanie, much like you, my wife went back and got a nursing degree from there later on, and they have an amazing nursing program there. I mean, one of the best, not in the state but the nation. That's the type of the facilities and programs that they provide for anyone who wants to learn. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We're growing the programs that are at the Davis campus in Layton. We've learned how to do a lot more things online over the last 2 years for some curious reason. And then certainly the things that are on the Ogden campus as well. But like I say, we want to help Centerville grow and thrive, and please feel free to reach out if we can partner in any way. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, 2 fun items on our agenda, and thank you everyone that came for both those agenda items. All right, let's go move to the first of the public hearing items that I mentioned. This is a public hearing regarding the zone map amendment on 1756 North Main Street. And is Mackenzie online with this?
Yeah, she's on Zoom.
Okay, so Mackenzie, are you going to talk about this?
Yes, I am. Okay, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I've never been on this end of a Zoom meeting, so this is exciting. This first item is a zone map amendment initiated by Ira Royal and Luann Bowler. In the past, they purchased land from their neighbor to the south and are in the process of realigning that border. The reason this is coming up as a rezone is that the Bowlers and the Jensen and Mebius properties are in two different zones. And per our code, we cannot have two zones in the same parcel. So this is just to realign the zones along this new proposed property boundary. A little bit will be going towards the Bowlers and a little bit towards the Jensens. It's a slightly skewed line to match up with what is going on the ground. The Planning Commission reviewed this last Wednesday and they recommended it for approval. And Lisa has drafted an ordinance if you approve this zone map amendment. I believe it is, let's see, number 4, ordinance 2022-04. Oh, sorry, looking at the wrong one. 03 for the Bowler rezone. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those for you.
Questions for McKinsey or the drafting of the ordinance by Lisa?
The applicant is here.
Applicant, if no question, did you have anything to say? Nothing from the applicant? Okay, thanks for being here. So we do have nothing for the applicant, so let's move to the public hearing portion on this, and we can come back after the public hearing portion for any further questions for staff or the applicant. So this is a public hearing matter on zone map amendment related to 1756 North Main Street. So that public hearing is now open. Any member of the public is welcome to come and introduce themselves to address this matter.
I'll just step up for a second. I'm Christopher Mebius. I'm at 1738 North Main Street. I just wanted to say part of the reason why we want to do this for the Bowlers at 1756 is because the house that we're living in now belonged to my wife's grandmother, Marion Jensen, and the Bowlers have been a great asset for her as she was living in that house. And when the Bowlers came to me and said, hey, we'd like to buy a little bit of land so that we can do a little thing, my immediate answer was yes, because this was, at least in my mind, because I need to pay them back for how they treated my wife's grandmother. And quite frankly, they've helped us understand our own house, because there was a lot we didn't quite know as we first moved in. So that was part of the reason why I want to do this, and I just wanted to give that context. I think it's important, so thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you again. I met you soon after you moved in.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, further comments on the public hearing? Seeing nothing further, we will close the public hearing and we will go to any questions that any member of the council has for staff or for the applicant, Royal Bowler.
I like straightforward ones like this, so I'm going to motion that we adopt ordinance 2022-03, amending the zoning map.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This does require a roll call vote, so let's start at the end.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Ed?
Sorry, I was muted. Aye.
Okay, perfect. That motion passes 4-0. And I like straightforward ones too. I kept giving council many chances to ask questions, so they all felt it was straightforward, so.
I have to add, I lived across the street from her for a little while, and she was an amazing lady.
Thank you.
We loved her and her dogs.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to the fourth item on our agenda. This is another public hearing. This is a public hearing on a zone map amendment on 295 East 300 North and 286 East 400 North. So, McKinsey, are you presenting again on this?
Yes, I'm presenting this one as well. I'm going to share my screen. I'm not sure how that will look, so let me know once you can see it. Okay. So this is similar to the last item. The applicant, Chad Morris, is under contract to purchase this property that's highlighted in red from the current property owners and add it to his property. He and his, I think it's an LLC, owns 286 East and 320 East on Parish Lane. And again, he would like to add it to it so that he can continue with his proposed development that is currently at the Planning Commission level. That Canyon Point subdivision is contingent on this parcel being the residential medium zone. It appears that previously it was part of the residential medium zone and was split off so that the owners, the Slagowskis, could have some more backyard, but they are willing to sell it to Chad Morris. So once again, we can't have two separate zones within a same parcel. And so the Planning Commission last Wednesday recommended this rezone to you with a vote of 5-0. And Lisa has drafted an ordinance 2022-04 for this with just a note that if approved, then this parcel will need to be combined at the county level. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Mackenzie, I listened to the meeting last week. It seemed like Heidi Shegrid voted nay on this. I just wanted to maybe point that out that.
So Heidi voted nay for the Canyon Point conceptual site plan, but she did vote in favor of the rezone.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay.
Further questions for staff right now? Okay, the applicant, Chad Morris, is here. Applicant, do you want to speak?
Thank you for letting me come up. Yes, just as you can see on the map, that property is surrounded on three sides by the RM zone. And from what we can tell, it probably was originally. I'm not sure why, other than possibly to make it one or synonymous with the owner who purchased it, was changed to the residential low. But I have, obviously, the seller has the desires to have that changed so it can be incorporated into our project. But and also I've spoken to neighbors in the Granite, also, I can't remember what that's called, the development below.
Granite Square.
Granite Square, yes, who have also expressed interest in having that as part of our property. So I think mostly so we can trim some trees for them. But yeah, so it makes sense to us, to neighbors, and per the map, it makes sense that this should be rezoned. So, and before I leave, I'd also like to mention that I truly believe we have the most amazing police force around. So I probably can't talk about it. I was just talking to Casey and started bawling for some reason because of the influence they've had on my kids. So, but that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for applicant at this time before we do the public hearing? Okay, this is a public hearing.
that we adopt ordinance number 2022-04, amending the zoning map.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, let's start with Councilman Ince. You still there? You're on the vote?
Yeah, I'm still here and I'm not muted and I'll vote aye.
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 And that motion passes 4-0. Thank you, staff, for your work. Thank you, Mr. Morris, for your work as well, too.
Thank you.
Let's go to item number 5. This is another public hearing. This is a zoning code and municipal code amendments in relation to food trucks. Lisa, you want to give us some background?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is an ordinance amendment to both your zoning code and your municipal code regarding food trucks. This project has been on the Planning Commission's goal list for a few years, and since the state adopted the food truck regulations, we don't have a lot of food trucks in Centerville, but we did want to be responsive to the state statutes, and so these ordinance amendments are to make sure that our code is in compliance with state law. The state law restrictions, or at least the intent of the food truck ordinance, is to make it easier for food trucks to operate in cities. The idea is that if you required a business license for every time a food truck moved to a different location, it just isn't functional for them to even operate. And so basically they're saying, look, you can only require one business license. And oh, by the way, if they have a business license in another city, you have to recognize that business license. So this is why you'll see ordinance amendments in both the zoning code. So we drafted ordinances in the zoning code saying this is what we can restrict. And then also municipal code amendments in our business licensing saying these are the restrictions on reciprocity and the health permit and the fire permit. So we took this to the Planning Commission last week. They did recommend approval after a public hearing. They had one suggested change that we maybe add the definition of location or same location, because a lot of the regulations right out of the state statute say, look, if you're at the same location for more than 10 hours, then we can have certain regulations, and if you're at the same location for less. And so one of the comments was maybe we better define that. So we did take that back and suggest that a new definition of location or same location is anything on the same lot or parcel. So we'll try to go with that. I was hesitant at first because the state does they restrict cities from regulating distances, so we can't put any distance requirements from a building restaurant or anything like that. But I think on the same parcel it makes sense, because the comment was, what if they just move the food truck 10 feet or 2 feet? So with that, this is a public hearing requirement, but staff is recommending approval of these amendments. We are aware of some additional state amendments this year to the Food Truck Act. I don't know if that's been passed yet, but we are watching those, and essentially they're trying to regulate ice cream trucks and food carts under the same umbrella, which right now they're excluded. So we'll just watch that and might be bringing more amendments, but for now this is the recommendation to bring us in compliance with state law.
Lisa, can you answer for us how this relates to special events of food trucks coming in? If the city has a celebration or there's a ribbon cutting for a new business or something like that.
Yeah, the Planning Commission kind of asked about that, and typically we try as a city to just follow the same rules as everyone else. But whether it's a public or private event, if you're bringing in more than one food truck, it's considered a food truck event, and it would require a conditional use permit. If you just bring in one, it's just a food truck. But we should note, I should highlight that staff is recommending that food trucks are not allowed in the public right-of-way. This is one area that we can regulate. There was some debate with the Planning Commission, but again, I like to start conservatively with our ordinances, and so we're allowing these food trucks. Let's see how it goes. If you want to open up the public streets, but I think it seems a little dangerous to have them in the public right-of-way. et cetera. So there are some liability issues and people moving around those food trucks. So we're not recommending in the public right of way. And if it is in a city park, you have to have the approval of the city to allow it in the park.
So can we take what you said about the food truck event? So for the 4th of July, we call 10 vendors. We get a commitment from 1, but 4 of them show up. Is the 4th of July committee in trouble because they invited 10 vendors?
Well, how many show up in your hypothetical?
Oh, let's call it 5.
Okay, that's a food truck event under our definition.
But there was no confirmation, so they had no way to know that they had to apply because nobody's showing up. They have no commitments.
I would still say it's a violation. 5 trucks show up, it's an event.
Again, when you have a special event as well, there's a sales tax, right? So we don't collect the sales tax. A food truck business license, correct me if I'm wrong, the business license for the food truck is in Farmington, and they're here in Centerville. We don't collect point of sale sales tax on that food truck. However, when we have special events, we can ask for that sales tax dollars since it's a point of sale for Centerville. Does that make sense? Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how we've always debated and discussed this in the past with special events.
I don't know.
Well, anyway, so-
Sales tax regulations.
So anyway, so there is that sales tax, so we do require a sales tax, a temporary sales tax for Centerville to benefit from the sales tax generated.
I was just looking at that from procedurally, so it sounds like if we do intend to have food trucks, we should inform any kind of committee chair to go ahead and get the conditional use, irrespective of how many vendors say they're coming. Okay.
I mean,
And just, we do have Bryce leading up on that as well. I'll have that conversation with Bryce, because I have not yet.
Okay.
So we'll need to make sure Bryce is aware.
Lisa, hypothetically, I know you're not in favor of anything in the public right-of-way. Could there be a CUP for one food truck? Like, for example, somebody wants it in their cul-de-sac, where there's not a lot of traffic. Yeah,
So-
is there a mechanism to have a CUP, conditional use permit?
We are limited on requiring any additional regulations. So for instance, under state law, if they operate less than 10 hours, we don't even they just come in. And so that's why, no, there would not be a mechanism for us to say, oh, well, here's what we want, and you got to come get your CUP. So, but if somebody wants to, order 3 food trucks for their party, then they would have to get a conditional use permit.
Because you're taking that from state ordinance or law?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are limiting, sometimes we've said anything over 10 hours still gets kicked into our temporary use, but it's permitted. Because again, we're not allowed to really regulate, so.
Okay, so I had listened to the discussion with Planning Commission, and I was a little confused on that point. I probably missed something that was discussed, but.
Well, I'm sure my response wasn't.
No, it wasn't that. I was probably multitasking a
Yeah,
little bit for a minute is what happened.
it is a policy decision, and I should have said that right up front with the Planning Commission to allow them in your public right-of-way, but, I think it's a broader discussion with your Public Works Department and those sorts of things, if you're gonna move in that direction, particularly in your residential areas.
One food truck, no matter what, it's either in the public right-of-way or not, one way or the other.
It cannot be in the public right-of-way.
According to our ordinance, or proposed ordinance. But if you were to say, okay, well, we're not gonna worry about the public right-of-way, it's just one way or the other, right? You can't, there's no mechanism to say, well, we might allow it, Like,
I mean,
it's
I could
not
look
gonna be
into it,
okay
but just.
on a busy road.
Yeah, I could look into it, but given my reading of the state law, we have very little regulation for a food truck under 10 hours. So we
Fair
can't
enough.
require a site plan even for those. So I think if we said, perhaps you could say, you can put them on certain size streets. You could do something like that, or streets in certain zones. But remember, your bigger streets are going to be UDOT streets.
Right.
And then that isn't something we have jurisdiction over anyway.
Right, exactly. Okay, that clarification was very helpful. I support what you're saying on it. I just wanted to maybe have a little better understanding.
Like I said, I just kind of want to wait a year or two and let's see, and, if we, other cities are having a reasonable experience with food trucks. I mean, I know Salt Lake I've probably seen them in public rights of way there, but I just don't recommend it at this point for Centerville.
I like the starting conservative and see how it goes.
If we have a couple of block parties, we'll just, if we're invited, then we won't change the ordinance, right?
That's right.
Okay, obviously, there's not an applicant here, but this is, so no applicant to hear from, but this is a public hearing. So let's go to the public hearing portion regarding the zoning code and municipal code amendment in relation to food trucks. So that public hearing is now open.
But your hypothetical isn't outside the realm of possibility. It's becoming more and more popular for millennial weddings to just have a food truck show up for these backyard events. So.
Right. Well, and I can think of a wedding that happened in Centerville a couple of years ago where the food trucks were parked on the street, and it was fine on that road. There was, not enough traffic to be concerned about it. But yeah, I do think it is a popular thing, and I can think of several places where, people are going to be probably a little sad about it. But
Remember that we only address them by complaint. So if somebody doesn't complain,
got you.
see what I'm saying? And in a small, if it's in your,
enforce it unless.
right, we don't enforce unless by complaint. So if it's in a little cul-de-sac,
Are you
But if I
implying,
wanted to do it, I know better, right? So I
Right.
could not.
Robin, are you implying keep the neighbors well fed and it won't be a problem?
that's right, that's right. That's exactly
Just
right.
make sure you invite everyone.
Yeah, if you leave someone out, you're gonna be in trouble.
Fair enough.
They can't complain till the next day anyway, and we'll be closed, so.
Seeing no member of the public come forth, we will close the public hearing. That's one of the most interesting public hearings I've had. And we will go if there's any further questions on this to staff.
I would motion that we adopt ordinance 2022-05, amending the zoning code.
Second.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Let's start to my left with Councilwoman Hurst.
Aye.
Are you going left to right?
We'll go right.
Aye.
Aye.
Am I up? Aye.
You're up. Yeah, we're trying not to leave you always for last, but I either have to take you first or last, so.
Well, I'm having trouble with my screen. I can't figure out. The picture of you guys is so small, I can't tell who anybody is. So just leave me last and I'll be happy.
Okay. That motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Let's go to item number 6. This is appointment of new members to boards, committees, and commissions. This was initiated by myself. We have had some turnover in some positions, and we needed to get the Landmarks Commission up and going again to get Councilwoman Meekum something to be liaison over. So I have a number of appointments here, so I'll go through them by how they're listed in your report. Dan Ditto for Planning Commission, Martin Dorrance for Tree Board, Adam Alva for Parks and Rec Committee, Matt Layton for Parks and Rec Committee, Grover Marsh for Landmarks Commission, Kate Werrett for Landmarks Commission, Patty Marsh for Landmarks Commission, Mark Palmer for Landmarks Commission, and Annette Palmer for Landmarks Commission. So I'm looking for, what do we call it, advice and consent on this one? So
I'd make a motion to approve the mayor's recommendation for commissions.
Yep, I'll second that, Bill.
we have a motion and a second. I don't have to roll call on this, right, Lisa? 31, okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Let's move to item number 7. This is review the budget calendar and set date for our first public hearing on the budget. And I see him coming out of his chair. So Nate, do you want to talk about this?
Thank you, Mayor. So it is officially budget season. The reason for bringing this before you is twofold. One is just to give you an informational timeline and let you know of some timelines that the staff is working on the budget, as well as other times and meetings that will involve the council. And the The one thing that I do need the council to decide on is state code requires that we notify the county of the date and time of the first budget hearing for the fiscal '23 budget. So staff is proposing that May 3rd, the council meeting on May 3rd, will be the public hearing for that. That's when we'll present the tentative budget. It will be open for a month for public to review, at which point we'll come back the first meeting in June and hold the next public hearing regarding the budget. So attached to your packet is a timeline, just of some dates. Some are set in stone.
Don't know if the mic, YouTube can't hear us, so sorry, we're just technical difficulties.
Some of those dates are set in stone and others are still tentative. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field those.
So the only thing we have to set is the May 3rd date, the rest can jog around as needed?
Yes, as we get closer to the end of the year. I mean, we don't have to make a decision on anything but the May 3rd date tonight, but there are some timelines in June, so.
Well, it seems like the May 3rd date's pretty self-explanatory and the rest
Right.
seems reasonable, but if we need to change it, we can, so.
Probably with the exception of the May 3rd date, once you notify the county, is that right?
Yeah, so that's the one that we do need to set in stone.
Okay. But the others we can adjust if necessary. Okay.
Any other questions for Nate? So, you have a motion on this to approve that as presented with,
I'll make the motion to approve it as presented with the first public hearing being held on May 3rd, 2022.
I'll second that.
Second.
okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank
Can
you.
I make a comment?
You may.
Nate, as you're getting into the budget process, and I don't mean to throw stones when I say this, but it's going to sound like I am. I think all departments should be aware on a long-term basis that if they are facing things like what was brought to us for the water department today, we ought to have those brought forward as early as possible and during the budgeting process so they can be dealt with on a more timely basis. I'm really frustrated with a 30% increase in 1 year. We shouldn't be doing that. We had a difficult proposition with regard to tax increase this year. And part of the reason that I pushed the way I pushed was we've got to avoid these kinds of shocks. We need to get them out and on the table early so they can be dealt with. So if you would emphasize that to every department, I at least would be very appreciative.
I agree with you, Bill, and the tragedy is we undershot what inflation was going to be, even with our tax increase.
Yeah.
Councilmember
Yeah,
Ranslick, I do appreciate that. We do, last year's budget discussions was not, it was spread out over a couple of months, and I think that was problematic in remembering what those issues are. We have two items that I'd like us to consider in the future, and that is essentially a budget retreat where we establish and look at all these priorities, because there's two different things going on here. We have a wish list of what we'd like to see in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and I don't want to confuse that with what we're trying to accomplish in the next fiscal year. Now, last year we did have, the departments did report what we'd like to see. And the challenge is when we hear what they would like to see, our eyes get bigger than our budget will allow. So Nate and I will be having budget discussions with our department heads tomorrow, and we're already, with the property tax increase and all of that, still needing to find cuts of $767,000. That's where we are right now, of trying to trim out that wish list. So they will present And this is what we need to do a better job as administration of presenting the budget. And Nate is working on a capital improvement program that we've been discussing over the last couple of years and carving out those infrastructures and capital needs separate from the operating budget. And then we do want to start looking at the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years so we can start budgeting appropriately. And I've challenged Nate, we're pretty stagnant in terms of our budget and growth. We can start forecasting, looking at a 5-year budget and approving a 5-year budget. We approve an operating budget for the next fiscal year and then a forecasted budget for the next 4 years. But that way we can start working with department heads saying, look, you're not going to get your bobtail this year that's $268,000, but we have budgeted for next year. So we start laying out and being a little bit more strategic on our capital equipment needs and projects, right? So tomorrow we'll be going over what they would like to see the next fiscal year and hearing their priorities. I have asked them and challenged them to say, what are you really looking for long-term? Because I also need to know that as well, Councilmember Ince, of what you're looking for so we can start planning for that. When we do the presentations, we'll have an item that says long-term needs. Here's what we're asking for this year. Here's what we need to consider. And that's somewhat what we did last year, but we didn't really go into the water rate, as you know, it kind of shocked you tonight, that we did last year. Go, sorry.
So I'm going to throw out some cognitive dissonance here and say that at the same time that you're putting together your wants list, please be very respectful of the fact that residents in this town and in this county are being whipsawed by tax increases across the board, inflationary pressures, their salaries aren't going up, and as much as we want to keep everyone whole as possible, we need to be as aware of that as we can be and as fiscally conservative as we can be, because at some point we're going to reach the limit for the citizens in the community, and I don't want to do that if we can avoid it. And I understand we have needs, but we also have to look at what is the absolute needs, because I just don't see how people are going to continue to make it work with the inflationary pressures that are out there.
And we agree. So our budget that we have, this is not uncommon for a $10 million budget for us to try and carve out $750,000 to $1.2 million that go above and beyond, you know, as far as asks. And so so our role is to come to you with a balanced budget. Now, if you feel from a policy standpoint you want more money here, where are you taking it from? Because we're coming with a balanced budget, and that's what we're recommending. But you as a council have that opportunity to say, nope, we want to spend a little bit more money in this, but where are you taking it from? And that's entirely up to you. Or what property tax increase, how much you want to go for a property tax increase to make that happen.
And it's going to be a tough year because of some of the state legislation potentially impacting, first responder retirement packages and restoring some of the benefits that they've lost over the years at the legislature. There's going to be some budgetary impacts that we can't avoid because they're outside of our jurisdiction, and that's one of them. And unfortunately, the pie doesn't slice any thinner. Something will have to go, and I don't know what that is yet.
It's funny you use that term because that's a conversation I had just today is, pies and what departments, how big is the department's pie and how much is it growing year after year? Sorry, Councilmember Harris.
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with you, George, but I do really think that Bill's point is really important in helping us look at that long-term, because just looking at 1 year, and I know it's a balancing act when you're talking about that you've got to cut $767,000 out to balance the budget. But I still would rather see some of these long-term needs so that we can say, okay, well, this year, maybe it's got to be the water. But next year, hopefully we've got that established and we don't have to keep doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And part of the budgeting process where there's basically the ask and then there's the allocated. Right. As long as the ask is inclusive and showing what they need over the next year or two, and then in some of these cases with Public Works, some of the snow removal equipment's been getting old and we need to replace some of that. Yeah, we're going to have to pick, in this budget year more than any other, we're going to have winners and losers in terms of at a department level, and there's just nothing we can do about that unless we go back to the residents and say, we're going to make everyone's winners and you get to be the loser, and nobody wants to have that conversation with residents.
So you will see that I'll be trying to schedule a budget retreat. We have a council that we're going to have for at least the next 2 years, right? So I'd like to sit down, not to try and solve it before this next fiscal year, but to sit down with a budget retreat and figure out your priorities for the next 5 years. Because then that helps guide us in what we're doing and what the departments should be focusing on because that really does help us at our level. Right now, we are just working together, trying to find that balance and give and take to get a balanced budget. But it would be a little bit easier if we understand what you're interested in us proceeding with for the next 5 years. But what I would like to propose for this current fiscal year, the next fiscal year discussions is, instead of it being in a work session and then it's spread out over a couple months, I'd like to dedicate 2 evenings to just presentations and budget discussions, so you hear it all at once and you get to kind of work on that. So I'm looking for 2 days, maybe a Thursday, Friday, a March 10th, March 11th type situation where we can just, we'll have dinner provided and we're just hammering out department budgets and you're hearing all the presentations all at once. Or it could be an all-day Saturday or a Friday evening and all-day Saturday.
17th and 18th.
Yeah, that'd be better.
We kind of discussed it at E-Team. We know we had some department heads had some conflicts. I believe Corey might be out that
I'm like
week.
Councilman Ince, I'd have to reschedule some things on
Yeah,
that
I'm
10th.
chairing a
11th.
board that night on the 10th.
Are you, you're
Do what?
talking March
I'm
10th?
chairing a board on the 10th.
Yeah.
Or it could be an evening of Friday the 11th, all day Saturday on the 12th, or it could be an all-day Saturday. We might be able to get through these in 8 hours. I mean, we're going to try and get through it 8 hours tomorrow, so that might be pushing it. But
Yeah, I mean, we can also extend it out a little bit if we need to.
So I want before and after pictures of your 8-hour meeting, and let's see if you don't look completely haggard at the end of 8 hours of budget discussions, then I consider an all-day, but that's a lot of budget discussion.
Nate's like, can we get
That is a
longer
lot
than a
of
half-hour
budget.
lunch? And I'm
I
like,
think
no,
I-
half-hour lunch is all we get.
I think I'd prefer 2 evenings just to give a little bit of time to process. I'll do
And that's why we
whatever, I'll
proposed
do
2
whatever
evenings.
the majority of the people need to do, but,
Oh, I can guarantee after 4 hours, I'm zoning out.
well, that's
I-
what
I
I'm
won't be
worried
able to
about, is that I can
concentrate.
only, my brain can only take so much and then it will just shut down.
So you don't need to solve it tonight, but be mindful of that, and maybe Jennifer will be sending out an email to maybe a doodle poll of something just to try and figure out what those 2 nights are.
Okay.
So
Brant, can I just ask you too for some, maybe this happens in that retreat, but the capital improvements fund, I see it in the budget. There's a lot of things in the budget that I don't totally understand, but that one I would like to have a better understanding of what, I can see there's money being put in for that. Is that streets, water, storm? Are you trying to put all of the capital improvements in that fund?
it's flex, right? So as of right now, none of that money is allocated to a specific department. The
Are you
reason why
taking money from the enterprise fund to put into that?
enterprise fund stays in enterprise fund. That stays in its own. That's just
Okay,
general fund
okay.
projects, so, streets, parks, whatever the case might be, that stays in general fund. The enterprise funds have their own capital improvement
Okay.
projects.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Streets also has the
Transportation. But we can
Yes.
easily transfer, I mean, streets and transportation are all general fund.
Yeah.
I'm just the new person here trying to.
So
take
yeah,
that.
so what we're trying to do is, we've exceeded essentially, well, it's 35% is the cap for a rainy day fund according to state, but it's,
Okay.
used to be 25%. So to avoid an audit finding, if you have any more than 25%, we've relocated that to Fund 47. But we have plans for that, because once we go to a capital improvement program, then that would be,
What's Fund 47?
it's a new fund we created, that's capital improvement.
Oh, okay.
So whenever we say Fund 47, we're talking about the funds dedicated to projects. Now,
Okay.
keep in mind that funds, and you want to make sure that's healthier projects. Just because there's money in there, you don't want to spend it down.
Right.
You want to make sure there's some balance in there, but those funds could be used for cemetery, right? So you could reduce potentially that bond if you want to use the funds for that. There are opportunities for that money to be used for some projects. However, we'd like to set up the CIP, capital improvement program, capital improvement plan, whatever you want to refer to it as, and that would be essentially the funding mechanism for those projects. What we're not seeing, and this is what Councilman Rentz was talking about earlier, I believe, is what's the true cost, or I think Councilman McKeon, true cost of doing business, right? We have our operating fund. What does it cost to run a city operating-wise? And then you have capital improvement programs, facilities, infrastructure. And we want to start showing the differences of running the city. Here's how much we need to support the city. Here's how much it costs to operate the city. And one of the issues you have when you mix the two, it starts getting combined and you start getting lost on what the budget actually means. You put a line item in for a capital improvement program or project 1 year of 500,000, somehow it's just carrying over every year. And you're like, wait a minute, what is that? If you move it out, then it's treated differently and it's not part of your operating fund. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I appreciate Nate. He's doing a lot of work on this to try and separate that out. And again, I'd like to take it one step further and have a 5-year forecast.
I would love to see the 5-year forecast. I think that would be super helpful with,
It's just helping department heads understand that you're not getting it this year, but you're getting it next year. And then it's easier to understand where we're going, and you as a council can prepare for that. And you might say, oh shoot, we're gonna need a property tax increase in 3 years, or a rate increase in 3 years, if it's stated, differently. Kevin Campbell's working on that. I have an old book from Yuma that's really thick, and we go through each project, and there's a description of the project, what it's all about, and then the funding mechanism down at the bottom. And it goes all the way out 20 years, and then the wish list. And it goes into detail. And we had an employee dedicated to operating that, overseeing that project. But it was very helpful for a council to see what projects are needed. And then how do we budget for it? If it's a grant, it would say a grant. We're pursuing a grant for this project. But anyway, we're trying to get to that point.
But this may be the year that we don't top off that fund to put anything into Fund 47 because we might be drawing down against our funds. Because this is pretty much a rainy day as far as I'm concerned from a public perspective.
And there is a possibility that you use fund balance, and won't have an issue with using some fund balance with anticipation of improved sales tax revenue from young automotive sports coming in. Let me say we're anticipating $200,000 a year from young. Maybe it's $100,000 because we have the incentive, for a few years, but then you could say, well, that'll hold us over until that starts coming in, so let's just use some fund balance.
right?
Not highly recommended, Nate's kind of cringing, don't use fund balance for operating costs, but there is an opportunity to.
I totally agree with you on that, but yet if you kind of have that 5-year plan, you can kind of make those choices as you try
Absolutely.
to balance what is the best way to fund
Correct.
everything that's needed.
Yeah, everything's forecasting at that point, you're just trying to get some idea, but the hard numbers, when we come up for that operating year, will be firmed up. But anyway.
I don't want to use fund balance for operating costs either, but I don't want the residents to use their fund balance for operating costs either, so.
There's a balance, and I think that if you're open to the idea, we're open to it to help balance it, to try and address some of our immediate needs for sure.
Right, yeah, I know I'm singing the same tune, but we can't make sure that the city is always whole at the expense of the residents. Sometimes we have to share that pain.
I like what's been said. I'd like what you've instructed staff to try and do their best, and so we don't have these surprises. But I do also want to, councils, that we come knowing what we feel is important as well too, and that, we be concise on what's important as well too, and getting taken care of, so. So I think it goes both ways. Great discussion. Anything further on that for Nate or Brent right now that you want?
We'll just send out a doodle poll. It's going to be tough trying to get all department heads and each one of you to figure out those 2 days, but we really need to figure out those 2 days. And if it does span over maybe, 4 hours one night and 4 hours the next week, that would be okay too. I just don't want to space it out too far.
Okay.
And I want to try and make that happen in March. And then allows April to make any sort of other adjustments we might need to make. So May, we have the tentative budget ready to go. So there'll be probably a follow-up meeting in April as soon as we get the numbers in for property tax and a few other things. Just to follow up, but we want to make sure we're on the same page with departments first. Anything else, Nate? Did I miss anything?
No.
Thanks for standing up there. Appreciate your support.
You're welcome.
I felt like I just took over. Sorry, Nate.
So Nate, stay for a second.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we're moving to item number 8. This is the monthly financial report. Now, traditionally, we just have him do a detailed analysis every quarter. This is the January 2022 financial report. He has highlighted some things which I appreciate on that report. Is there anything that we need to know further, Nate, while you're there, or that council has questions for him on the financial report?
I don't have anything.
Anything, council, that you saw that you want to ask him about? Okay. So thank you for preparing that financial report and including that as well too, for us to look at and the highlights you do on it. So,
Thank you.
thanks. All right, let's go to item number 9. This is the minutes review and acceptance of 3 meetings, February 1st work session, special session, and city council minutes. Do we have any changes?
I do.
You do, okay?
Yes. On the city council minutes, let me pull up my note. Page 4, line 12 and 13. I would just like a little clarification on what I said, and this is the language that I'm going to suggest, and anyone can correct or change it if it needs to be. Councilmember Hurst said she believed, after further research, there may be a situation where a willing seller may prefer the use of eminent domain, so we should not eliminate that as an option as appropriate.
That's, I haven't got to, you're saying that's what,
That's what I would like the change to be. I think it
That was
said-
where?
This is on page 4, lines 12 and 13.
no, right into it.
Would be the city council.
I just wanted I think that it said I would be willing to consider that in a certain situation. The situation would specifically be a willing seller may prefer the use of eminent domain.
Did you, recorder, did you find that spot, or?
Yeah, I have the page, do you want me to pull up the minutes?
Page 4, line 12 and 13, right there, there you go. And Councilmember Hurst, what are you saying that was said?
I would like the situation to be labeled as a willing seller, is essentially what I'm.
Okay,
So it could be maybe a situation such as a willing seller.
other changes? We have a motion to accept minutes with that change.
I'll make the
Make the motion to, go ahead, Robin.
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes with the amendment on the city council minutes as explained.
Second that.
A motion is second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's go to city council report. Councilwoman Meekum, you have anything for us tonight?
Yes.
Great.
First of all, I don't think the transportation board even exists anymore.
I'm not finding it does either.
I've made some phone calls, and to be politically correct, I won't say any more than that, but
It's okay, it's all free this month anyway, so what are you trying to
whoever's in charge is there is not any meetings being held at this time.
I've had the director of COG that does our agenda and the commissioners saying, find this for me, where is it, you know? And they haven't found it either, so I don't know who you talked with, but, yeah.
Nika Randy used to be in charge of it, and then it was taken over by somebody else. And since there's been one meeting. But we did have a Utopia board meeting yesterday. They've taken on Idaho Falls, but only as a consulting. They're doing this on several cities. They're just taking on the consulting end of it. So they're not hiring any new employees. They're not sending people to that area. But we get a little bit from each subscriber.
So how much does that plow back into bond repayment potentially with each one of these consulting deals they do? If they're taking, what, $1 per subscriber, or did they mention what the numbers would be?
I was trying to, I thought I'd written it down. I think Idaho Falls is like $40,000 a month. No, am I wrong?
No, it was approximately 40,000 a month.
Yeah, it was 40.
That goes into Utopia, not UIA.
Yeah.
Great.
I understand. He's got the look of saying,
Goes into
continue.
Utopia. Okay, that sounds like profit. When does that come back to the bond?
And they've got Santa Clara and Cedar Hills. There's several that they're doing it with, and it's very profitable.
So my ask would be for the next meeting is, so when does that translate into money back to the cities? I mean, we got UIA doing its thing, but Utopia hasn't returned any money back.
Yes, Utopia has returned. They gave us, what, 120,000 last year?
So we continue to receive an OpEx payment, and it matches the inflation of the bond increase every year. And 124,000 is what we receive next year. I anticipate that being plus the 3%. So our bond payment essentially is not going up any, right? Because we're being covered by that. In the UIA meeting, they did talk about a fund has been established in Utopia. Now, again, it's trying to figure out legally like an admin fee that we charge the enterprise funds, like the water fund and drainage fund, to compensate for our time. There's trying to find a legal mechanism to transfer UIA funds to Utopia to help with the bond payments.
Sounds like all they need to do is adjust the bulk rate between the two and they're done.
I looked at it, and what they're charging UIA is fairly reasonable, and I'd say bordering on.
That's my problem.
Questionable.
It's questionable.
So-
They should be charging market.
So, we're again charging UIA to repay Utopia. So Utopia then could help repay the bond payments for us.
UIA, neither UIA or Utopia should run at any profit. So if UIA is positive above its bonds, all of that money should be flowing back into Utopia until it's whole, because it's the infrastructure partner.
Not true. Not true. There are some.
There are extensions, I get it, but the core infrastructure.
So I'll say right now, from what I understand, in the reading between lines, there's again, we can't go into too much of a discussion, but this is just clarifying. There is a fund established to, when that is figured out, because the goal was trying to make all the core cities, the original cities, built out. So West Valley and Layton and all them still need to be built out. So once that occurred, then there would be looking for opportunities. I believe West Valley is close to built out, if not completely built out now, and Layton is working on being built
West
out.
Valley's still got quite a bit left to be.
Is that what it is? It's West Valley. It's Layton that's almost built out.
Yeah, Layton's almost
So
built out.
those
West
bigger
Valley's
cities
got
actually took
lot.
a back seat to allow the smaller cities such as Centerville, because there was a grant available, a rural grant available. So the smaller cities were built out, and the bigger cities are now finishing and completing their build out. Now, the other cities that are coming on are bonding themselves, and that's completely separate.
Right,
from what
that's
we're
different
discussing here.
infrastructure.
Correct.
And I get that from the UIA side. Okay, so I just didn't want to go too far down, but yes, the same story. When do we get our money?
Right.
And I will say that we're both talking about those things, right?
Right.
Councilmember
Right.
Mako and myself on each one of our boards.
You know, if there's money, I'm asking for it.
Absolutely.
Our take rate is up to 48.44%.
What does that mean?
That's the percentage of people in Centerville that are taking Utopia, or,
Which is one of the reasons we were built out first, is because the model supported, because of the socioeconomic background and the demographics, that the take rate would be higher per square mile than it would be anywhere else. So
it's kind of interesting. See if I can bring this
How
up.
much is that increasing per year?
Well, it increased a ton with COVID.
Okay,
I mean, we really.
wondered.
We really went up with that.
I believe our take
because-
rate before COVID was like 35 or 36.
Yeah.
wow, it did increase a lot.
But so Brigham City is 44.8, Centerville is 47.8, Clearfield is down to 13.7, Layton is
Clearfield just came on.
37.96, Linden is 57.84. So you can see that we're, you know,
Well, that is good.
yeah. So, and it did, there was a huge, surge when everybody started to come home and work from home and have their kids from home. A lot of what people had wouldn't support 4 or 5 devices at once, and so they switched to Utopia. So,
More?
that's all I've got.
So I would ask in regards to landmarks, get these people contacted, and you need to put back to me with potential couple other members. I might have another member too. So, but they're looking forward to getting the meeting set in time and getting going. So.
Okay.
So, thank you. No more? Okay, thank you, Councilman Meekum. Mayor's report. I got 3 items. Number 1, Wasatch Integrated Waste Management, the biggest thing I think that came out of that meeting was that they did a compensation study and their wages were fairly close to what their compensation study found. They were about 80,000 short, which is about 1.3% of their total wages. And the board approved that adjustment. Number two, fire board. It's interesting that Mike brought up chips and the difficulty of getting chips. They're looking at replacing an engine in Station 81, and they requested the board's approval to get a proposal on what that would cost. But to build out an engine, part of the problem is getting chips for it. And it's a year and a half from the time they order an engine to getting it in, from that standpoint. And that's part of the problem. And there's specialized equipment to build as well, too. And then item number 3 is Councilman Entz and myself and Brandt have been attending either by Zoom or in person the LPC meetings on Monday. We may be coming to you for some call to action. A lot of discussion has been taking place on finalizing bills and getting them to where it's acceptable to us as cities and towns. And so look for that call to action on some of these bills. If you want to talk to any one of the 3 of us about any particular bills, then we're happy to do that as well too. Councilman Entz or Brad, anything else on that?
No.
Okay, that's all. That's what I have for you because we had early on the agenda the advice and consent and approval. So
Speaking of that, last year we had somebody from the Leagues of Towns and Cities that sent us kind of an update of everything that was happening every day, and I haven't got that this year.
So have you signed up? So if you're not getting the daily recaps, you just need to go on. I mean, I think it's critical for you to get those daily recaps.
Right.
If you're not getting them. And, okay, let me
Are you
ask this.
getting them, Gina?
I'm not
Who is
getting them.
not
I did
getting
sign
them?
up for all of them
Okay.
through the conference I attended, but I've never gotten anything.
Because that's also where you'll get the action alerts of, we need call to action. We talk to the legislators all the time, but they really care when the mayor and council members call. And honestly, sometimes citizens, if you want to activate a couple of citizens, that's great too.
I'm happy to do that. Can I go onto their website and sign up? I'm wondering if they just, I don't know what email I put. It's possible they
I'll
type.
find the link and just send it to all of you.
Okay, that'd be
Just-
appreciated.
I wrote it on a piece of paper, so somebody had to enter that, and I'm wondering if a paper got lost in the pass around or something.
There's a number of bills that we're really struggling with, and the action alerts will be critical. When those come out, those are the ones call right now because it's going to committee or it's going to the floor. We'll really need to call.
Okay.
anything else for me? Okay, city manager report. Brent?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just taking my note real quick. Couple of items. Appreciate Councilor Meekum's report on Utopia. Similar discussion in UIA. Just a couple more beyond that. What I thought was great from a report from Roger Timmerman was that there is no intended increases in the monthly fee of $30. In fact, there were some discussions at one point of reducing that fee, but with inflation, they're able to keep those costs stable for the foreseeable future, which I think is great because I just heard from a friend that Comcast is going up quite a bit, and I don't know what any of the other ones are doing, but I think that's great that they're able to keep their fees stable and there's no intended increase.
So with that, I still get people who comment that they can't purchase and that they were always told that using the city's finances, they'd be able to purchase. That was part of the reason for the original bonding, and that model is not available. And some people feel pretty upset about that they're locked into a lease and they've got tax dollars on the line as well.
I wasn't involved in those discussions, but yeah, that's definitely a decision that was made, and I will say from our standpoint financially, those are a pain to manage when there's selling of houses. In fact, we're going through one right now that is just a complication, unexpected, hey, I didn't know, or whatever the case might be. So there's some challenges with that payment. Anyway, so that's a policy decision I'm sure a board made prior to me. you might have some more insight on that.
I got plenty of insight on that one, but I'm just saying, as if they're looking at a fee reduction, I think that it would be appropriate that they also look at restoring the buyout for
I
individuals.
highly doubt they're gonna restore the buyout. But it is something I
Thought
will
I would
bring up.
ask.
No expectation, 28% increase in revenues, which I think was phenomenal over this time. Let's see. I discussed Rocky Mountain Power, but just again to state that again, Kirk and I had a great conversation about the power lines. We talked about banners, Lisa, as far as making sure those banner poles are recognized as far as their our joint use agreement with them. We'd also discussed emergency management, again, trying to get them to the table. I think Wade Skinner's his name, so we'll include him in an emergency management meeting with Chief, just to make sure they're involved, so we have a point of contact.
Do we, I guess with that tabletop exercise for emergency management, can we get Rocky Mountain to put the data on the table? Like, here's all the lines that they fixed. Because I think once you put the map down and Rocky Mountain overlays where the down power lines are, it either completely validates what I said about you couldn't get out of town, or maybe I just wasn't smart enough to get out of the maze. But I think it would be very telling to show what the down lines were in the last outage due to the windstorm. I think
That may be something we would need anyway if we were gonna try and find a grant, a potential grant to.
well, yeah, and if we're really asking them to ensure that we have evacuation routes out of town, I mean, the worst situation for us would to have a windstorm that takes power lines down at the same time it topples a chemical train. We can't evacuate the city.
Yeah, really good point.
And the last, just tidbit, Weber State, my grandfather was the Dean of Student Services at Weber State for many years, so if you graduate from Weber State in the 80s or 90s, he probably signed your card. Emil Hansen, and he was there for many years, Dean of Student Services, and then became the assistant to the president and retired in 95. I remember growing up, he would take us to football games, and Grandma would bring the hot chocolate, and we'd watch football games, and so I bleed purple, love Weber State, and anyway, I think it's great. It's just fun talking about my grandpa who was there for so long and did so many great things for Weber State. But yeah, so I appreciate Brad coming.
Yeah.
He's an incredible president, and I think he's doing a phenomenal job.
I really love that they, showed one of our own residents that has done very well. That's an
And she was
amazing story.
amazing. Yeah, what an amazing
Brad's
story.
engaged, and he shows up to games. I don't know, the guy only has so many hours in the day, but him and his
Right.
wife are just in everything.
It
It's
was
just
impressive
awesome.
that he was here as well to recognize her.
And that had to mean a lot to her.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have, unless there's questions for me.
I saw Brad a week ago Tuesday, and he was excited to tell me he was coming and bringing one of us, the students that's excelled from our city. So
I'm a nerd. I love Weber State.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Right.
Anything else?
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a closed meeting?
A what?
A closed meeting?
I don't believe so. Okay, we have.
I guess I should have asked earlier, Brant, where are we on the
cemetery.
consultant? Yes.
Yes, that was another one. Thank you so much for reminding me. So Kevin has done a preliminary interview with 7 potential land acquisition. One, I just got an email today from one saying, I'd love to help out Centerville, and she just helped Pleasant View secure a 23-acre property for Pleasant View. I want to have a follow-up conversation with her, and there's another one. I haven't seen their resume quite yet, but there are 2 or 3 potential that I'd like to have follow-up, just to lay the groundwork and say, here's our expectations as we go through this process to make sure their fees, because I'll be honest, the proposed fee was really low, and I'm really nervous that they may not understand fully what we're asking them to help us with. So, to give you some idea, generally, from what I understand, UDOT, when there's any land acquisition of one parcel, the fee is a flat fee of $2,000. And I'm just, if that is the fee, $2,000 to help us acquire the cemetery property, I don't know if we're getting the wraparound service that we might be expecting. So I want to have a follow-up conversation. If it's $2,000, $4,000, that's great, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I would say we're looking for more than that.
So, but yeah, I mean, we're kind of half expecting to go in possibly with paying the 3% real estate fees, right, in this property, in this process. But if we can keep that fee at a flat rate, that's why I want to have a follow-up conversation, just to make sure. And this property did have potentially eminent domain associated with it. So fully aware and prepared to work with landowners to avoid it, and which they did in this case, which is great. So next meeting, I do hope to have a proposal or someone to come discuss, but I'll work with the mayor on next steps and what he'd like to see. That's where we are. And also with that, follow-up, I know there's been a first and a second to adjourn. But back to city manager report, this reminded me, I am working with Jacob. We're going to start looking at our current cemetery and our current policies before we start expanding our cemetery services. We need to figure out what we're currently doing because some of our policies need to be cleaned up or how we're implementing. We don't know contact information for some of the owners of the burial rights, and I really want to get a lot of that cleaned up before we take the next step. So we're going to work on that in conjunction with this other piece.
That sounds great.
Thanks for the reminder, Councilmember Rance.
Okay, thank you.
That was the further discussion on the first one. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right.
Council adjourned.